I'm good. I am good.
There's never a doubt that we can also hear you.
Yeah, there you go. It's a little bit thin today. Good enough. We're going to continue on and do holidays. We already did worship. We're talking about holidays. And last week, Doug went into Purim. What was Purim? What was it a holiday for? What'd you say? Time of Esther. Yep. And I'll touch on that one. This is the different ones that we have, and this is our calendar. What kind of calendar would you use? What's the name of it? Gregorian. Yeah. We have a Gregorian calendar. So, and that's what we start with January as our beginning of the year. Beginning of the year for the Jewish calendar is when? April, May. It's Passover. We'll get to that today. Okay, so Purim, he went through, he did this, he did this, he went through this, because I remember you asked what a benediction was, and I remembered I fixed Esther on this page. I put the extra H in it. Okay, I added some questions on some of these. With these three verses from, who is second to the king before Mordecai became second to the king? Haman. I always heard Haman. Haman. Okay, so he was the antagonist in this one. Can I ask another one? Yeah. Who's Ahasuerus? The king? Yes, you're married to me, aren't you? Did she do this in her own class? He's the Persian king. Okay? Another name we've seen for that is, I think Artaxerxes is Ahasuerus. So they give you a little bit of remembrance on that particular one. So it is a Persian empire, and Mordecai becomes second to the king of the Persian Empire, which is a pretty powerful position. Let's see. So we have Haman here. Now, did you get to this?
I did.
You did? He got to the Pur and Purim. What are they casting? I added this one though. What are they casting lots to do?
That's what Haman did to decide the day that he killed the Jews.
Yep. Crush and destroy them. When's the best time to go do that? So that's what he was using, casting lots. So, did you get to this one?
I did all of Purim.
You did all of Purim? Okay. Okay, so you got into the beginning of Passover. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get into Passover. I've got 42 slides, so I just went through 14 of them real fast. So, Passover. It's on the evening of the 15th of the month of Nisan. There's also another name for Nisan. But it's on the 12th and 25. It starts on the 1st and 26. It starts on the 21st on the 29th. Celebrates the exodus of the Israelites, right? Why does the date keep moving? The calendar. It's the Jewish calendar. That's why this is our calendar, but it's not their calendar. And their calendar is, and you just basically said what it was, their calendar is based on the lunar cycle, which means every month is either 29 or 30 days. So it's different, and that's why it keeps moving. So it's unleavened bread, lamb, bitter herbs and spices. Supposedly, if you lived within 15 miles of Jerusalem, you're supposed to go there for Passover. And it really got packed. If Bethlehem was packed when he had to go down there for the census, it's nothing like it got packed in Jerusalem. 3 million people into that city, which is a walled city, is really, really dense. I mean, they had to spill out outside the walls. What does this holiday foreshadow? Well, that's what happened in Passover, but what does it foreshadow? The death of the Lamb. It's Jesus. It's the perfect sacrifice for everybody's sins. Okay, so in Exodus, now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, in the land of Egypt, this month shall be the beginning of months for you. So this is the beginning of the months. This is the first month of their year. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, they are, each one, to take a lamb for themselves, according to their father's households. A lamb for each household. Now, if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his neighbor nearest the house are to take one according to the number of persons in them, in proportion to what each one should eat. You are to divide the lamb. Your lamb should be unblemished male, a year old, and you will take it from the sheep or from the goats. So what month is the beginning of the Jewish calendar? What is it called? Nisan. So this is what they look like. This is the comparison of the two. You can see the first one, it's also called Abib, as well as Nisan. I'm going to turn around so I can point. Okay, so right here is where it lines up. It's between March and April is the first month. So you've got Nisan, you've got Ayar, Sivan. Sivan, a fair amount of things happen in Sivan. Tammuz, Av, Yul, Tishra, Cheshvan, Kislev, and then you got a little bit of Tevet that lines up with the December, and then it spills over into January because they overlap. And then you have, whoops, I didn't want to hit that button. Or that button. Then you have Shevat, and then you have Adar. Adar is the one where they have two different months for Adar. If it's a leap year, the amount of days in the month of Adar is different than if you have a regular year. So that's how they catch up in this particular calendar that they have. And this is how everything lines up. So the last thing that we went through first, because we were looking at our calendar, was Feast of Purim. But if you look at it here, the first one is Passover. And then you have the Feast of the Fruits, which is right here, and then you have Pentecost, which is the Feast of Weeks. And we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to Pentecost. So that's kind of how it all fits. You know, this was the calendar that I showed when I first came into this particular study, but this is how everything lines up. You see, everything kind of gets really dense somewhere around the month of Tishri. Okay, you got the Feast of Trumpets, you got the Day of Atonement, you got the Feast of Tabernacles, you have Hanukkah. So they all they're kind of grouped there. So you got to kind of grouped in the earlier part of the year, in the spring, and then you got them grouped late in the year as far as our calendar. So that's kind of what it looks like. But if you really don't understand that every one of their days, they don't have any 30 days. They have some 30-day months, but they don't have any 31-day months. They don't have any 28-day months. They're all 29 and 30. So that's why they don't line up. And that's why it keeps moving every year when you have it, is because it's based on their calendar. It's not based on ours. It took me a while to put this together. A little bit of research. So you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. So that's going to be in the month of Nisan or Abib. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses which they eat it. I couldn't write a sentence like that, but okay. They shall eat, yeah, I probably wrote that in a proposal, I redlined it all over. They shall eat the flesh that same night, roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs. Do not eat of it, any of it, raw or boiled at all with water, but rather roasted with fire, both its head and its legs, along with its entrails. And you shall not leave any of it over until morning, but whatever is left of it until morning, you shall completely burn with fire. Now you shall eat it in this way, with your garment belted around your waist, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in a hurry. It is the Lord's presence. Passover. So what do the bread and herbs signify? Let's take them one at a time. What is the bread? Unleavened bread. What does it signify? We do it now, the body of Christ, but it signified something else then. No, it wasn't manna. What do you do to make bread if you put yeast in it? What do you have to wait? What do you have to do? But when does it rise? Is it you put it in? No. It takes time. They were supposed to be ready to go. You were in a hurry. Everything's in a hurry. So the idea behind unleavened bread was you don't have time to put the yeast in it, wait for it to rise, and bake it and make bread. This is something you do because you don't have time to stay. You don't have time to do anything. How about the herbs? Or herbs? They were bitter. That's a clue. That's right. Remind them when they're the bitter times for them when they were in slavery. They didn't seem to remember it very well, did they? They kept complaining. Says, "Oh, we're just back in Egypt again. We had so much to eat." So that's what that signified. What did the blood on the doorpost signify?
Thing for the Passover.
It was protection from death because of the lamb. Again, it's foreshadowing the protection we have from what we do because of the blood of the lamb. So how are you dressed and why? You're ready to go, okay? You got your belt on, right? You got your staff. You got your sandals on. You're sitting there barefoot, and you eat it in a hurry. My dad always used to say, "Son, nobody's going to take your food away from you. Slow down. But you're supposed to eat this in a hurry because you're leaving." Remember, this was the last plague. They're getting ready to leave captivity. So, for I will go through the land of Egypt on that night and fatally strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the human firstborn to animals, and against the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live, and where I see the blood I will pass over you, and no plague will come upon you and destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Why the firstborn? Christ was the firstborn. It's all still foreshadowing.
It's all in the first fruits that they gave as offerings and stuff like that. It's always God comes first.
Well, yeah, God comes first. God gets the best first. And Moses said to the people, now this is later on in Exodus, a little bit later, the next chapter. Then Moses said to the people, remember this day which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today in the month of Abib, remember that Abib is also Nisan, you are going out. And when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you shall keep this service in this month. So who ordained this as a Jewish holiday? It's God, right? We'll get into ones that aren't. That's why I'm going to ask that on every single one of these. So, continuing, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast of the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leavened bread shall be seen with you in all your territory. You should tell your son on that day, it is because of the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand in a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. With a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this statute of appointed time from year to year. How many days are they eating unleavened bread? 7, okay. Is 7 an important number in the Bible? Means completion. Usually means completion. May mean perfection, but more times than not, it means completion. What do they eat on the last day? That's the feast. That's the lamb, the bitter herbs, and everything else. They're eating the bread coming up to it. Then they came to the day of unleavened bread. So I'm just jumped into Luke. And this is the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. What day would that be? The 7th day. Jesus sent Peter and John saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." "Where do you want us to prepare it?" they asked. He replied, "As you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house that he enters, and say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will put you in a large room upstairs, all furnished. Make preparations there." They left and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. What day of the week is this? Huh?
The day before last.
Thank you. That's one of my answers. You had your razor soup this morning, right? Sharp tongue. Close. It's Thursday. It's Thursday. It's going to be Thursday night. Thursday night technically would be Friday because their day started at sunset. Because when they had the worship the Sabbath, it was from the beginning of sunset on Saturday to sunset on Sunday. That was the Sabbath, or that is the Sabbath. So, I'm sorry, it would be at sunset on Friday and at sunset on Saturday. What helps me remember that is in Spanish, Saturday is Sábado, Sabbath. So, it's a Thursday. Why did they wait until Friday to take Jesus? They took him in the morning, right? It's like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning.
Bigger than worrying about breaking commandments and their own laws, they're worried about people's reaction if it happened in the Passover festival.
In the Passover feast. Yeah. They waited until all that was over before they went and took him. And that was Friday morning, and by Friday, about 10 o'clock in the morning, he was nailed to the cross. Observe the month of Abib. This is in Deuteronomy, so I've snapped back to the Old Testament. Sorry if you're getting a whiplash. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, your Lord your God has brought you out of Egypt by night. And you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock of the herd at the place that the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste. That all the days of your life you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. So, where does it have to be observed? I even underlined it. Yeah, it has to be done in Jerusalem. You can't sit at home up somewhere else and have the Passover feast. He said, no. He said, at the place the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. Where's the temple? Jerusalem. They have to go there.
The first group of people that left Egypt, they all died before they entered the land.
All the adults died. All the younger ones survived. Yeah, he wanted them to remember, and this is when Moses wrote it. He wrote it in Exodus. You can see he told them in Exodus, but when he wrote it again in Deuteronomy as well. No leavened bread, no leaven shall be seen in all of your territory for 7 days, nor shall any of the flesh that you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain all night until the morning. So you get the same thing what he told them that he wrote in Exodus. You may not offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but the place at which the Lord your God will choose. He chose Jerusalem to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset, at the time you came out of Egypt. You shall cook it and eat it in the place that the Lord your God will choose. So he keeps hitting that point over and over again. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. For the 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it. So that last day you're not supposed to do any work. So I've kind of been hitting this point. Where is not allowed anywhere in the territory during the Passover? They don't allow any leavened bread anywhere in the territory. Not just Jerusalem, anywhere in the territory. What requirement that is cited in verses 1 through 3 reinforced here? Yep. Where I dwell. Where I chose to dwell. That keeps getting reinforced in what's written in Deuteronomy. Clive.
That since they left Egypt, the Passover wasn't kept again until they went into the Promised Land.
That's true. That's true. He said the Passover was not kept until they got into the Promised Land. They did have the tabernacle, but they didn't keep the Passover. So in Ezra, on the 14th day of the first month, sounds familiar, the exiles kept the Passover, for the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together. All of them were clean, so they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, for their fellow priests and for themselves. It was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from exile, and also by everyone who had joined them and separated himself from uncleanness of the people of the land to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, and the Lord had made them joyful and turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he aided them in the work of the house of the God of Israel. What period of time was the Passover suspended and why? He knows the answer. It's the book of Ezra. Right? So what does that indicate?
Ain't nobody home in the promised land.
There's a few people that are left. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar, 70 plus years before this, razed Jerusalem to the ground. I mean, he even tore the foundation up of the temple. It was that complete destruction, utter, complete destruction. So the whole time they were in Babylon, is Babylon where God was choosing to dwell? Could they have the Passover? Nope. So this is the first time in 70 plus years that they can have the Passover. Now, what's the state of the temple at this particular time? Anybody remember?
Just a foundation at this point?
It's just a foundation. They've just got the foundation done. They've got it all put together, what it's going to be. And remember, if you look in the book of Ezra, when they look at it, some of them are crying for joy, and some of them are crying because they're sad. Because the ones who remembered what the temple looked like, now I'm looking at a foundation. And then others who hadn't seen it and now saw this actually restored, were happy. So it was a really, really broad spectrum of feeling from the people when they saw the fact that they had been blessed, because I'll tell you, the kings were not known for being kind, but the kings were supporting it. Started with Cyrus, then you had Darius, then you had Xerxes, then you had Ahasuerus, which is also Artaxerxes. So back in Matthew, now as they were eating, Jesus took bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat this is my body." He took a cup, and when he had given thanks to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin. I tell you, I'll not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with my Father's kingdom." So, why do we use the unleavened bread? I'm going to leave you a few slides. What was Jesus obligated to eat when he instituted the Lord's Supper? Unleavened bread. He was perfect. He followed every part of the law perfectly. And what they had was unleavened bread when he instituted his Lord's Supper. Pentecost. Moving along. This is an interesting one. On the evening of the 6th, it's in Sivan. So it's later on is when Pentecost is. And depends on what it is. Pentecost is 50 days after Passover. You can kind of see that in the name, can't you? Like a pentagon. How many sides does a pentagon have? 5. Okay. Penta, 5. Pentecost, 50 days. Actually, it would be 49 because it's a 5. It's a factor of 5 because it says 7 weeks, but it turns out they rounded up to 50. Celebrates the revelation of the 5 books of the Torah to Moses by God. Sort of.
Yeah, the Penti goes with the 5 books.
Yep.
More than the day.
Well, let's get into it a little bit more because I have more. I added a lot more to it than what you had. So, traditions. Reading the book of Ruth, all-night study of the Torah. So I modified some of these slides. Those were what the traditions were. It's got a lot of names. Some of the names we apply to it are different than what's in the Bible. Some of the names that are here are sometimes used interchangeably, and it isn't always the same thing. Pentecost was supposed to be about the first fruits. But do crops all come to be ripe and harvested all at the same time? That's an easy one. No, it doesn't. What was some of their main crops? Wheat. I think they may have had rye, but they had barley. Barley comes to being ripe a lot faster than wheat does. Huh? They had grapes, they had olives, and all those kinds of things. So, observance. Males would pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem. This is typically what is said they would do. This is what the tradition said they do. And I hope to get to it to contrast it. Last day of the harvest, individuals as a pilgrim would bring their first fruits, which at the end of the harvest is wheat ready for harvest. So this is late in spring, early in the summer is when wheat's ready, which is why it puts it in the month that it is Pentecost. So this is I took out of Wiki, and what they explained Pentecost is about. In Palestine, the grain harvest lasted 7 weeks. It was a season of gladness. It began with the harvesting of the barley during the Passover. It ended with the harvesting of the wheat, and that was because of when they were ready to be harvested. Pentecost, the wheat being the last cereal to ripen. Pentecost was thus concluding the festival of the grain harvest, just as the 8th day of the Tabernacles was concluding the festival of the harvest. According to Exodus, blah, 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 the Feast of Weeks. So now we've gone from Pentecost to the Feast of Weeks, so they're using another name for what it is. It's the second of the 3 festivals to be celebrated by the altar of the dance of the males in sanctuary. They are to bring to the sanctuary, what's the sanctuary? It's a temple. The first fruits of wheat harvest, the first fruits of thy labors thou shalt have sown in the field. So that they're taking that, what it says. These are not offerings definitely prescribed for the community, but with a tribute of a free will offering of thine hand. Thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God, and thy son, and thy daughter, and the Levite within the gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow. So that's taken directly out of Deuteronomy 16. And then he talks about Leviticus. However, there is regularly appointed first fruit offering, which the whole community must bring. So this is the perspective written today, looking back of what it was supposed to be. And it's very tradition heavy with some scripture thrown in there. So this is here and now how they're remembering Pentecost. But what they've got, how do they do it now? What's missing that they can't do that it's talking about here?
Temple.
The temple. They don't have the temple. And then I pulled another one out that looked at it. The oral tradition builds. Now, what's the oral tradition? What documents are those? Remember? The Gemara and the Mishnah. Okay? So that's what we're talking about here. On the details spelled out in the Bible, and provides us with a beautiful description of bringing the first fruits, where an Israelite saw the first emergence of one of the 7 species of the land. So it goes into what all those that were, you were talking about them, Doug. He was to tie a string around it, designated as first fruits, at the appointed time during Shavat, which is another name for Pentecost. These fruits, first fruits of the land, will be presented to God at the holy temple in Jerusalem, or before the temple times at the tabernacle. With great pomp and ceremony, the people would travel to Jerusalem with their first fruits in baskets carried on their shoulders, an ox with gilded horns, and a crown of olive branch trees would lead the way. The journey would be accompanied by music and song. And we already talked about the oral tradition. What do they, according to the oral tradition, what do they bring to sacrifice? To give. Fruit, first fruit, right? Keep that in mind. I think I'll get there. When the pilgrims arrived at the foothills of Jerusalem, they would adorn the fruit in baskets. As they entered the city, the craftsmen, officers, and governors would greet them, saying, "Our people, enter in peace." A musician playing a flute would lead the procession and accompany the pilgrims to the temple. Upon reaching the temple, the first fruits would be given to the priests. Prescribed passages from the Bible, specifically Deuteronomy 26, 5 through 11, which is interesting. I don't know that I'll get there. Would be read, recounting the difficulties the Israelites had encountering before settling in the land of Israel. The ceremony would conclude with giving thanks to God for bringing the people to a land flowing with milk and honey, concluding with these words, "Now I bring the first fruits of the soil that you, the Lord, have given me." That's verse 10, but it's not verse 10 out of Deuteronomy. The people would then present their baskets to God, which there was rejoicing and feasting. So, how much of this do you think is directed by God? A lot of pomp and circumstance, isn't there?
Seems to be getting away from simplicity.
It's a festival, but it's like gilded horns on the ox. You got to have it in a basket, and you carry it, and everything like that. And there's people playing flutes and all that, and that's fine. But there isn't a whole lot of what God said. So Deuteronomy. Then I declare to you before the Lord of God, my father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with a few people and lived there and became a great nation, powerful, numerous. But the Egyptians mistreated us, made us to suffer, suffering under harsh labor. Then we cried out to the Lord, the God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our misery, toil, and oppression. So the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So this is out of Deuteronomy. He brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now I bring the first fruits of the soil that you, Lord, have given me. So this is out of 26 where they referenced it. Place the basket before the Lord your God and bow down before him. Then you and the Levites and the foreigners residing among you shall rejoice in all the good things the Lord your God has given to you and your household. Does this reinforce the feast of the first fruits? And if so, how? I gave the how, so you could just say yes or no. It's in Deuteronomy. It's direction from God. It certainly reinforces it. It says, but it doesn't have all that. Matter of fact, there's supposed to be a little humility built into this. You're so thankful what God's given you. And it doesn't seem to be what was reflected in the oral tradition. So in Numbers, on the first day of the first fruits, when you offer a grain offering of new grain at the Lord at your feast of weeks, you will have a holy convocation. You will not do any ordinary work, but offer a burnt offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. 2 bulls from a herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old. Also their grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah with each bull, and 1/10 with each ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, with 1 male goat to make an atonement for you. Besides the regular burnt offerings and its grain, you shall offer them and their drink offering, so that they are without blemish. Okay. What's here is an offering that's missing from the oral tradition and all the other things that they recounted about what the Festival of Weeks is about. Animals. The bull, the ram, the lamb, the male goat. None of that's in the oral tradition. It's all dropped out. In Deuteronomy, you shall count 7 weeks. Begin the count from 7 weeks to the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain. 7 weeks ends up being 49 days. They rounded up to 50. So this is where it talks about when it needs to be. It is the Festival of Weeks. And that's why it's called the Festival of Weeks, is because it's 7 weeks. Then you should keep the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. And you shall rejoice for the Lord your God and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant. The Levite is with you in town, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow who are among you at the place where your Lord God will choose, Jerusalem, to make his name dwell there. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. Talked about why it's called Feast of Weeks. How careful were they to observe these statutes? Not real careful. All the sacrifices of bulls and like that seems to got lost in the oral tradition.
They kept the timing.
They kept the timing.
It's not very well,
They kept the timing. Who's now in the tradition? It said the male does this, right? What does this say? Who's going to participate? Everybody. Everybody's all this, not just the father, but even the widow, the slave. Everybody participates in this one. The emphasis changed. In the 6th month, the month of Sivan, and this is taken out of the Talmud. The 10 Commandments were given to the Jewish people. Rabbi Yossi says it was on the 7th of that month. The Gemara comments, according to the one who said they were given on the 6th of Sivan. 6th of Sivan would have been commensurate with the Festival of Weeks. They were given on the 6th, and on the 7th, Moses ascended to Mount Sinai, according to those who had the 10 Commandments were given to the 7th of Sivan, which was given on the 7th, and on the 7th, Moses ascended. So they're all talking about Moses ascending. And this is where they're taking it, but they took it differently. They started making it something else. And this, again, this is out of the Talmud. Did I ask that one? Okay, we already talked about that. What do they appear to be celebrating here? Because the Festival of Weeks is about what? What God has granted you as far as the soil. They're taking it and saying, oh, it's about of when Moses gave us the word in Mount Sinai. What might be the reason for the switch? And Doug is going to talk about that next week.